So within Sussex Humanities Lab, I'm Professor of Performance Technologies, and I'm a theatre and performance historian, and I tend to have a terrible habit of trying to rope together the performativity and logics of Greek amphitheatres with 22nd century technologies. So I'm interested in the cusp of art, technology and science, but looking at it over time. So what I'm going to do is with this strange title, is look at questions of listening, but in a much broader historical context, looking at how musical practices might have been inflected by rules and sequential operations that we qualify these days as algorithmic, but that might be analogously defined also as algorithmic in some very, very old traditions. So in Old English, this wonderful word, hlisnan, designates listening, hearing, and paying attention. And of course, paying attention is something that we value in very different ways. And it's something that can be expensive in very different ways, cognitively, financially, socioculturally. And in different values systems, the trade-off between recognizability, a pleasing to boring upholding of existing habits and practices on the one hand, and surprise on the other, their exciting to alienating upheaval. This is what makes sonic arts, like so many other cultural forms, a rich collision point for study that can be both forensic and prospective. So this is my hang-up. I'm hung up on the past and the future, and I guess I'm somewhere you might call the present. I use the term musicking a lot, which comes from Christopher Small, and musicking designates all activities associated with music making. And I want to see how artists can depart from familiar frameworks whilst ensuring what are hopefully for them and for us compelling legibility of their work for their and their audience's engagement. And I'm interested in how conditioned our grasp of the rules and sequences of operations implied by the means mobilized by musicking means how this conditioning operates. And this conditioning, of course, includes practitioner and public socialities and expertise. So this word here, exosomatic, our techniques and artifacts make up what Robert Innes calls exosomatic organs. Many of you are familiar with the term, others perhaps not. These are often intertwined ways of extending, substituting, and compensating for the innate powers of the human body. Innes's definition ranges from simple tools and devices to more complex systems, and he includes microscopes, computers, languages, weaving looms, airplanes, and institutions. Exosomatic organs have their own dynamic logics. They have their propensities to evolve and tangle with other physiological, technical, and social organs, making up what Stiegler calls his general organology. And of course, they co-evolve with our perceptual schemata and motor skills. They entrain us to attend to levels of precision beyond our unaided embodied cognition as the primitive biological neural networks that we are. So musicings and tunings, which are our calibrations to given systems, therefore to the scales that are intrinsic to given systems, these imply economies and politics of paying attention. Actually, we have a wonderful colleague at Sussex called Kate Lacey who works on the politics of listening and notably of silence. In Chinese culture, to quote some interesting politics of listening, the foundation tone discovered by Ling Lun, the mythological founder of music, was a specific note produced with a bamboo pipe, and Ling Lun then added 11 others to create a 12-tone system. And he tuned his pipes, obviously, as Dan and Alice know, to bird sounds. Each dynasty had its own proper pitch, which had to be obeyed, and that was often fatal not to do so. So this was a kind of what in programming languages would be called imperative programming. And this is an image of the 9,000-year-old still playable bird bone flutes, because obviously bamboo was perishable, that were recovered from the Huan region in 1999. But I think it's interesting to Henan province, sorry. I think it's interesting to imagine how these flutes, with their specific affordances and their solicitations to be played, are actually, if you look at them forensically, they're sets of instructions, and they're sets of instructions with which you can play fairly predictable sequences. So this is the wider context in which I want to set algorithmic listening, an algorithm being a set of rules that precisely define a sequence of operations. So what do we mean by precisely define? From what point of view and at what level of detail? Canonical structures like the proper pitch of dynasties or the well-tempered scales of the fugue, these might be considered as sets of rules governing precisely defined sequences of operations in musicking. What we deem a precise, sequentially coherent operation in one context or in one value system might be viewed as incidental or ineffectual in another. Whence the need to work on concrete instantiations. And I think the references today to pragmatic playing around with stuff is really crucial. The same canonical structures that shape the evolution of our cultural practices instantiate conventions that some see as existing precisely in order to be challenged and surpassed. Paul's allusions this morning to resistance, ambiguity, and chaos as creative resources, I think, are really crucial in the art world and in the connection between the art world and the developing technology world. I would say that this is a vital evolutionary resource, this kind of practice. It's needed to keep us on the razor edge where predictable and unexpected phenomena can creatively clash. This is the kind of thing Alice is evoking with her ecospectralism reference. Artistic auditory practices that are complexified rather than simplified, not pedantically complexified, God knows anybody can do that, but creatively, interestingly complexified, and that act as trading or boundary zones where we simultaneously savour the elegance, a word often used in judging the functionality of algorithms, the elegance of ordered processes that comply with listening habits accrued by paying attention. And at the same time, these are zones where we experience the disruptions to those ordered processes on which evolving cultural dynamics depends. We listen for, we listen to, and we revel in creative agility to defy rules. Musicking involves stretching and compressing time, and repeated macro-temporal patterns induce rhythmic expectations, culturally shareable pattern resonances. These are terms I'm borrowing from Peter Cariani. And these are the backbone of compositional or improvisational sequences of operations. So the art of musicking implies the invention of resonant new patterns, which evolve with our exosomatic organs, probably starting with manually crafted percussion and breath-carrying instruments, Ling Lun's bamboo flutes, or these later editions of them, and ranging to machine and computationally engineered tools, synthetic, hybridized, deployed through more or less physically manifest systems. Machining techniques have progressively freed us from the fetters of embodied ergonomics and, debatably, the associated cognitive processes. The lathe, known as the mother of machine tools, which dates back to ancient Egypt, led to the invention of other machine tools in a process that might itself be construed as algorithmic. Again, it's a question of what perspective and what time frame one chooses to consider these evolutions in. So this image here is not actually of a Martian heart valve, although it could be. It's the computer-designed 3D printed valve block that was just successfully trialled a couple of weeks ago on the A380. And the design of this valve block surpasses any possible human modelling abilities. It optimises its very expensive titanium power medium. It's got far fewer parts to it, and it's 35% lighter than the already human computer-designed valve. And so we're headed for these sorts of exosomatic organs that have outpaced our own projection and modelling abilities. And I think this has been alluded to in many ways already this morning, but I'd like to do it in a much more naive way coming from musical and creative practice. And I think that these tools and artefacts generate new understandings of what do constitute the chronological and morphological hallmarks of operating sequences. So our understanding of what constitutes an algorithm and an algorithmic process is, I think, something that is being boosted, is being influenced by these kinds of tools. So our creative agility is intimately, if not iteratively, tied up with the design of technical artifacts that are part of human listening practices. And what I want to insist on is the fact that artistic and musicking type practices, sonic practices, auditory practices in a creative realm are the sources of complexities and richness and defiance and resistance that is precisely what's needed in order for us to get away from the path-dependent, purely technologically goal-driven processes behind our new resources. And I think I'm to time. Thank you.